Hey everybody, this is Garrett with Earth and Time, and today I'm starting my long trek back towards Texas from Utah, and I'm making my first stop here in a little town called Panguitch, Utah, along Highway 89, not far from Bryce National Park. And I wanted to stop here, show you and share with you is probably one of the most unique stories of survival that I've ever heard about, and it took place right here in Panguitch, Utah. Welcome to the Quilt Walk Park. This is one of the most interesting stories I've ever read about, and they have this statue, I believe made of bronze, to commemorate that event. Now, what was that event? In the 1860s, there were a group of pioneers in this area that were snowed in, and they and their families were starving, and the snow was so thick that they couldn't cross over it, and they couldn't figure out how to traverse from this area to get supplies on the other side of the hill. And they were trying to figure out an answer to how to get to a town nearby to get supplies. And the answer came to them with what they were kneeling on, and that was a quilt. So the entire community got together, gathered up all their quilts, and used quilts one at a time to put across the top of the surface of the snow to walk through a pass to bring supplies back to the starving families here in the area. So this was known as the Quilt Walk, and you can see they have a little bit more about this, about the 1864 group of the pioneers were facing starvation, and they used these quilts to walk over the pass to get supplies and to save their families. I always thought quilts were really cool and beautiful, but who knew they were so important to this community and for the survival of this community here in Panguitch, Utah. Really cool that they commemorate this, and one of the most unique stories, historic stories of survival I've ever heard. And as I walk around the statue, you'll see how the statue's reenacting of him standing on a quilt on the snow and then pulling the next quilt back. And there's probably a team of men doing this, and they took this and they would lay it out again. They'd walk and move supplies, and they'd do that over and over again all the way to the town. And as they moved these quilts one after another, they would eventually travel 40 miles through the pass from Panguitch to Panguitch, Utah to get supplies. And not only get supplies there, but then they had to get them back. And so that meant they had to repeat this process on the way back here, and they were able to save their families in the town. Fascinating piece of history, and one I would have never known about if I wasn't passing through here. I wanted to make sure I shared it with all of you. So the next time you hear about somebody you know making quilts, right, or you're at a state fair somewhere, think about how quilts like that were used here for a 40-mile trek through snow across mountains to save an entire community. This was known again as the Panguitch Quilt Walk. As I walk up from the quilt park, I just want to show you a little bit more of what the main street looked like for Panguitch. You'll see the mural that has Panguitch on it. You'll see this old gas station here, although it says auto established 2022. I'm pretty sure this building's much, much older. And you can see the old rustic setting of Panguitch. See the old buildings along the edges here, going all the way down off in the distance, and that's the direction we'll be traveling today, towards Capitol Reef. I love these small western towns that were set up in the late 1800s, early 1900s. They just have so much personality, and I love the architecture. As I walk around the town some, I love finding old murals, especially down old brick alleyways, but check out this old mural, Made in Salt Lake Sweets. Chocolates sold from Alaska to Australia. That's a really cool old and weathered sign. I wonder when this was made. As I start heading out, our next stop is actually going to be the childhood home of an infamous outlaw from the Old West, one Butch Cassidy. famous as a pair with the Sundance Kid. They had the Robert Redford movie that, again, reinvigorated all of the legends and infamy of those two. So we're going to go check out his childhood home, because he actually grew up not far from here in the central part of Utah. The other thing I'll point out as I'm walking through is, again, some of the old buildings here, and then some of the old signs like the Rexall Drugs. So cool coming to these little towns and exploring these off the main highway places. I've traveled up the road about half an hour or so from Panguitch along Highway 89 and came to this unique site, and this is the home of Butch Cassidy, as in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. So this is where he lived in the 1800s, the late 1800s. His family came to this valley, set up this farm and this house I'll go take you all through, or take you to look at here in a second. And he grew up here, and then of course went from here and went on to infamy for all kinds of nefarious acts, let's say. He was known, as you can see here, as Robert Leroy Parker, and some of his earliest exploits were actually in this area, including the little town of Circleville just up the road, which we'll drive through, and I'll see if I can get some pictures from there. So here's information about his childhood home here, where he lived from 1880 to about 1884. So it says he was 14 when his family moved here and 18 when he left. So he's only here for about 4 years. And he was part of a large family here, which is pretty common out in Utah. I mentioned he was from a big family. He was the oldest or first of 13 children. So we walked through that house. Imagine 13 kids. Now, they were different ages. He was out of here by the time he was 18, and he was here when he was 14. So I'm sure he was probably sleeping, working out in the fields, or who knows, other places, or working with other ranchers here. There is a story I heard about him working out here where he needed a pair of pants, and so he broke into a mercantile or thrift store in Circleville, took the jeans, but left money behind, but he ended up getting charged for that, and I believe that was the first crime he was charged for. And of course, from there he would go on to live in infamy as a famous train robber and bank robber, eventually being killed, supposedly, right, there's these urban legends, in Bolivia. Some people think he still survived. And we can see the setup here of the old home cabin. This was probably where they had goats and sheep and other things, or animals, chickens in here. And then you can see the old farm equipment that'd be out here. So his family was living off the land. Circleville, which was the next nearest town, is only a few miles going towards the north from here, and that ended up being an important spot for him when he was growing up. They have the home open here to go take a look inside, so you can imagine a fairly large family living in here. Not a whole lot of room inside this boyhood home. In fact, you know, his parents probably slept down here. There's a picture of Butch Cassidy there. And they probably had the children sleeping in the lofts or even outside, especially during summer days like today, which are quite beautiful. As I walk around the property, how did Leroy Parker become Butch Cassidy? Well, he got the last name Cassidy from a farmhand he met here and ended up becoming a cattle rustler with, as I understand. And his last name was Cassidy. And so this is somebody that he really looked up to, and he took on his name. Now, he got Butch because he spent time in Wyoming working as a butcher. So the two came together as his outlaw name of Butch Cassidy. There's lots of information on Butch Cassidy, and of course you can always go back and watch that movie. In fact, in Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, the movie, they actually filmed that in a scene in a town called Grafton, Utah, which I did a video on, where I was going and visiting a bunch of the ghost towns here in southern Utah. So I'll put a link to that video up here, and I'll put it in the description below. So we've taken a look at Butch Cassidy's childhood home. I'm going to keep trucking on down the road. I'm not sure where we'll stop next. We'll let it be a surprise. I'm just going to go and see what catches my fancy. I knew about the Quilt Walk I wanted to take you all to see, and Butch Cassidy's childhood home, I want to take you all to see here on Highway 89 here in central Utah. Let's see what else we can find. Just a few miles up Highway 89 is the town of Circleville, which I mentioned at Butch Cassidy's childhood home. So this is a place where he spent a lot of his informative years from the time he was 14 to 18, and which would really shape him into becoming the person he was, which is Butch Cassidy and the leader, of course, of the Wild Bunch, and then working with Sundance Kid. But it was somewhere in this area where he broke into that mercantile because he needed a pair of pants and they were closed. I believe I read it was on a Sunday, and of course in Utah everything's closed on a Sunday. Still to this day a lot of things are closed on a Sunday. And so he paid for the pants, but he broke in and he got charged with breaking and entering. And this may have been one of the things that helped set him on that path to becoming the Butch Cassidy that we know today. It's a cute little town, not a lot going on here, but I wanted to stop and show you the town of Circleville, Utah, and some of these old buildings. Just continuing to work my way on Highway 89, and actually turned off of what's new Highway 89 onto old Highway 89, and I'm heading towards a little town called Kingston, Utah over here, and I saw this old service station. So back when this was the main highway, this service station was probably jumping back in the day, and I like that they have an old truck here, an old Ford actually truck here, and then some old Buick over here, and you can see where the old gas pumps are for this old service station. There's a bunch of birds living in here now, but you can see the old service station here, and there's a little pretty birds that are living and making their home within this old gas station that's falling apart. Finding stuff like this, I always wonder, what did this look like in its heyday? What was it like when there were a bunch of people hanging out, maybe drinking a Coca-Cola here or working on cars, or you had somebody filling tires here, a service person. So pretty cool to find these old places like this. It's sad to see them in this kind of disrepair, but there's something interesting in that as well. Okay, we're going to head down the road. I did remember there's one other place I want to take you all to, and that's just on the other side of Kingston. And the reason why this road is where it's at is because this is an old trailway from hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and we're going to go take a look at and learn a little bit more about it. Welcome to the old Spanish Trail, or at least where it cut through here in the central portion of Utah. And they've done a nice marker back here where you can see there's a person on probably a donkey or a mule or horses traveling on this trail. So this canyon that I'm in right now would have been one of the few places you can cut between these different ranges as we're traversing towards the east in Utah. So this was known as the Fish Lake Cutoff on Old Spanish Trail. It's nice that they have this sign here. I actually don't know a whole lot about the Old Spanish Trail, and they have some information here that this was a pack trail that stretched 1,200 miles from Santa Fe, New Mexico to Los Angeles between 1829 and 1848, where they carry all kinds of different supplies back and forth between those two regions, which of course were both old Spanish regions. It says in 1800s an untold number of people came through here, mules, horses, etc. And there was one famous person that came through here, and that was a scout named Christopher Kit Carson. And of course Carson is well known. We spent time in Nevada. I've taken you all to places in Nevada, Carson City, Nevada, right? So Christopher Kit Carson was a famous explorer and mountain man out here, and apparently he passed right through this way in 1848. I know I'm talking a lot of history, but I can't ignore these amazing rock formations behind me. And I want to talk a little bit about what was happening in this area of Utah back after the time of the dinosaurs, and that is there was a series of large eruptions, volcanic eruptions, that were occurring here, these large calderas. So think of something like Yellowstone National Park and how that's a large caldera, right? That's a large volcano. Imagine dozens of those, most likely out in Nevada and Utah. And I did talk about this a bit at the Cedar Breaks National Monument as well, where we saw the Brian Head ash flows rocks. We saw the remnants of the Brian Head ash flows as those rocks that were along some of the trails. This is what's most likely known as a lahar. So this would have been a large mudslide composed of volcanic ash and dirt and sand and large rocks that came off of some of these major explosions. The other thing we can see is it's all dipping. Now, I imagine this dip is not the primary dip of how these things first came off of the volcano. I have not done the work out here, so I'm not positive about that, but that's my guess, is that these were a little bit flatter and they've been rotated up because there's probably some kind of fault zone. In fact, there's probably a fault running right through these ridges there. There's a little difference of color from the white on the right-hand side to a buff right through that saddle in the hill over there, and I think that's a fault. So that fault probably rotated all this down this direction. But we're in a land here where most of the rocks in this area are all related to these ancient volcanoes that are erupting in this area, and it creates a really cool looking topography. You get a lot of these spires happening, and you get some pretty spectacular hills and cliff faces. As I'm driving down this old Spanish trail, there is some absolutely amazing geology and geologic formations, and you can see those back here, and maybe you'll hear the cows mooing behind me across the river in this field. Look at this. So these are a bunch of those lahars or mud flows that were coming down from some volcano, and I don't know the source of that volcano, but this is classic architecture we see associated with that. So this is recording a series of large volcanic events that were taking place here after the time of the dinosaurs. What's cool is there's actually a number of caves that you can see in here as well, and I wonder if maybe the folks who are going down this trail following this river as part of the old Spanish trail would actually spend the night or stay in some of these formations or some of these caves. So as I was continuing down Highway 62, I saw a couple things. One, these white rocks over here, which look kind of like pumice. I wasn't able to really get to them, but they're definitely rhyolitic or pumice-like, and so they may be those types of rocks that float. But as I was going by, I saw these beautiful columnar joints up here, suggesting that I'm probably pretty close to the source and maybe at part of maybe the caldera itself, where the lava was here. It cooled over a long period of time, much like we saw in San Diego at the throat of the volcano when I did that video at the Calavera Volcanics. This is very similar. In fact, I think this may be pretty close to where the source or the center portion, or close to it, of these large calderas that are erupting all this material out. So that is pretty cool to see. I've never noticed that here before. All right, on a lonely road again. You'll see there's a couple cars that pass by, but it's pretty quiet here in central Utah. Not a lot of people about. I've made it to my final stop for the night. However, it's still pretty early right now, and where have I come to? I'm at Tori, Utah, just outside the entrance to Capitol Reef National Park. Now, Torrey is a great little town. There's a bunch of little things going on, including right now a farmer's market, which we'll go take a look at. But I want to see if I can learn a little bit about the history of this town, because it's similar to Capitol Reef National Park, which is just about 10 miles going east of here. This was an area that was settled by pioneers, and I believe they brought in farming and orchards and the like here as well. And I'll see if I can learn more about that. Plus, I saw some cool statues of dinosaurs. Let's go take a look. So a couple things I'll plug. I met some really nice folks who own this Capital Burger food truck, and I had one of their burgers. Oh my goodness. They have a burger called a mac and cheese burger that's amazing. So if you're ever coming through this way, going to Capitol Reef, and Capital Burger is here, I highly recommend you stop and eat here. There's also a general store that you can run into. But what I'm so excited about is, look, it's a dinosaur. Now it's a big metal dinosaur, so I'm sure it's going to be pretty toasty, but let's go take a look at some of the sculptures over here. Whoa, look at that. It's a rusted Dilophosaurus. Got some little T-Rexes, a dragon, a Utah raptor, which is, I'm pretty sure what this is supposed to be, which is really cool. And there's little Utah raptors. What a cool little shop here. This is amazing. There's a boar. And this is called the Tory Trading Post. And look, it's a sauropod. Okay, one more cool dinosaur thing. And actually it's a flying reptile, it's a pterodactyl. Look at that. There's a little stream running through town also, and I don't know, I believe this is just an irrigation ditch, so I don't know if this is water coming from maybe the Fremont River that they've diverted into town. But again, it creates a nice ambiance in this cute town. They have these stone bridges to cross over to their houses across this little canal, and a little rope swing in here, although it doesn't look very deep. Check out this old schoolhouse. So this is the Torrey Log School and Church. So often, just like when we saw in Fruta, the churches and the schoolhouses were one and the same because they didn't have a lot of public buildings. It also probably served as a community hall at one point as well. But look at this old school, built in 1898 here. Look at that bell on top. And I don't think the school is open. Let me see. Nope, it's not open right now. Oh, and here's a billboard right by that schoolhouse that talks all about this. So the town's origin was named after Colonel J. Tory, and it was settled, imminent date was 1898. So when they built the schoolhouse, I guess, and the church is when this became an actual town. And here's an aerial photo of the town. So I'm sitting here now, and we walked down this street and saw the little cool dinosaurs here, and I showed you the deli and the burger truck, and then here's the schoolhouse where we're at. Such a cool building, and look at this beautiful grass. So those of you who live down in the south like we do, I gotta tell you, St. Augustine grass has nothing on the beautiful soft grass that you have here. It's like laying on a cloud. It is spectacular. And look at these fruit trees. I wonder what they're gonna grow. I don't know my trees. If anybody has an idea what these could be, maybe peaches, some kind of stone fruit, possibly. We can see they're coming in a bunch of different places. I love finding places like this and learning about these little communities that were set up in really remote places that have been very difficult to thrive in early on, and they really had to make their own way. All right, let's go take a look at the farmer's market. Some of the coolest experiences I have in my life are when I stumble across small towns and their activities going on there, like here at this farmer's market. Let's go see what they have, and let's go support some of the local folks. So this farmer's market has so many things I love, from somebody who has rocks and petrified wood and fossils to all kinds of goodies to eat, as well as they have bluegrass going on down the way. So let's go take a look at that. I can't think of a better place to end my day than here, listening to this amazing music by this band who donates all of their tips to the food bank here. So let's take a listen to these guys for a little while. I'm going to sign off. If you enjoyed this episode, you know exactly what to do. We'll see you tomorrow on the road.